What's up guys, welcome back. Today we're going to do a full walkthrough where I'm going to build an Airbnb AI-powered reviews sentiment analyzer. Bit of a mouthful, but all the words are there that describe what this thing does. Now, it's going to be a long one. There's going to be plenty of sections, so I highly recommend just getting locked in and coming along for the ride. I'm going to take you from idea to planning to execution to full build all in one video, so I hope you find it useful, guys. Without further ado, let's jump in. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to start here in a great app called Whimsical, which I highly recommend. They've just launched the desktop app as well, which is nice. So this is just a high-level brainstorming tool that I use. So let's kind of map out the flow here so you can see the steps and get an idea of how this thing is going to work. So the first step, let me get myself a bit comfortable here, is we are going to create a wish list on Airbnb. Now, what does that look like? I'll just quickly show you. So this is Airbnb, and these are all my wish lists. So let's just take this one, for example. I was just doing this earlier as sort of an example. I'm not actually going to go to New York, but let's say we're interested in going to New York. Now, the standard process here is you look on the site, you do a bunch of searches, and then you get a few properties. And what I tend to do anyway, which I think is helpful, is you heart them and then you add them to a wish list, and then that collates it all nicely for you, and then you can jump to your wish list and kind of start thumbing through them. They've added nice little features here, like you can thumb it up or down, add a little note. So the idea behind this app is basically to wonder, okay, imagine if I could take this list and pass it to AI, have AI or the automation that we're going to build kind of click in and run through all this data. But the stuff that we're really interested in is here, the reviews. So there's a few interesting things, like the standard UI is that it only shows you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 reviews, and then you have to click in and then you get a modal, right? And then there's some sort of, if there's a bunch more reviews, these reviews have kind of an infinite scroll behavior. So when you scroll down, they will load more, pretty common behavior. So that's the challenge, is to pull all these reviews and then basically create a huge list of all the reviews for each place as a massive data set, and then feed that into AI for analysis and processing. And we want to do some cool things. I basically want to ask AI stuff like, look for red flags, because the high-level review score doesn't give you the whole detail. So look for red flags, point them out to me, compile them into a report, and then kind of maybe push that into, send me an email, 2 minutes later. In terms of the trigger, we're going to do a pretty manual trigger now. We're going to do just a post request to trigger my make.com automation, but I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. So let's jump back to the Whimsical. So step 1, let's create a wish list on Airbnb. Now, we need to make this public, because right now you see we are like in my account. So this URL is kind of hidden behind some authentication, which is a little bit tricky. So we want to, as part of this process, I'm going to basically send as a view-only link and then copy this link. This is what you'd do if you were going to send to somebody, who wants to have a look at your list. So if we jump over to another browser that I am not logged into, and we hit this link that I just copied, we're going to see roughly the same UI, but as you see up here, I'm not logged in. This is like a logged out, soft logged in version. So this is what we want. This link right here is what we want to kind of generate every time and then pass into the input of our automation. And the automation is going to do all the lovely good stuff for us. So we're going to create a wish list on Airbnb. As a side note, we need to generate a public URL. So that's just like a little aside here. The next step is we need to trigger our automation. And the way that we're going to do that is, well, first, what we're going to use make.com because it's basically the best. If you are on Zapier, I highly recommend watching some of my videos to learn how to use make.com. They've got also a good university or just a bunch of tutorials online, but it's the best. It's really good. It kind of gets you into a bit more of a programming mindset, which ultimately gives you more power, and the UI is a lot nicer as well. So we're going to use make.com, which I'll show you in a second if you're not aware with, as the connecting service. And we are going to basically trigger this with a post request. If you don't know what this is, I will expand on this when we get to it. I'm going to trigger this with a post request to the module, to the webhooks module in Make. Again, if you don't know what this is, this will all become clear a bit later. And how are we going to trigger it? There's many ways we could do it. We could use a fancy button, maybe on Notion, which I love. But for now, we're going to just use an HTTP client called Postman. If all this stuff is new to you, don't worry, it's going to become clear as I go through it. Okay, so that's kind of the first part. And then that's going to trigger our make automation. So we are going to make a little kind of section here. I'm going to call this make automation. Let's give it a nice color to differentiate. Here we go. And then in here is where you can consider this as like the start of the automation. All right. Okay, so what we're going to do here, now that we're into this make automation land, is the first step is we are going to get the URLs from that property list. Pardon me. So we're going to get that. We can use something like the HTTP module and make, but we're going to see that can be a little bit tricky sometimes. So as another way to get this, we can use something called Scrape Ninja, which is free. I think it gives you like 50 calls a month, between 50 and 500 calls a month. So we're going to use that just for ease of use here, if we need to. But we're going to get the URLs. So basically, that means inspect this page with a robot. And if you see here on the left side where the blue is, that represents kind of the link. I'm going to zoom in on the edit to this A tag, which is a link tag. And if you can see here on the href attribute, that signifies or shows us the path to that link. So we're going to have to pull this out into a nice list or an array so that we can do stuff with it. So let's jump back here. We're going to get the URLs. How do we get them? A nice easy way is to use AI. So we're going to use AI to extract these URLs. Then we want to basically loop through them or iterate through them to do something. So I'm going to kind of put a little descriptor here. We're going to add a loop to make it very explicit. We want to loop through, and here's the really fun part. I'm going to get to the specifics when we get to it, otherwise it will make no sense now. But on a high level, we are now going to start digging into what's called the hidden API of Airbnb. I won't bother explaining it now because we're just starting high level. And what we need to do is basically extract the room ID from the URL. Now, what is the room ID? If we have a look at the URL, here's what it looks like. It's pretty long, it's huge, but if we go to the start of it, it goes like this: airbnb.com/rooms/ and then you've got this number here, right? This represents the room ID. We're going to need to take this, but we can't use it in its raw form. We need to encode it. And this will become clearer later. But we need to extract the room ID from the URL. We need to encode it. And then call the Airbnb hidden API, receive a bunch of JSON, which represents the reviews. Now, this is the really cool part. So we're going to get a big data set, which is going to represent all the reviews, which we can do anything with. And that's kind of it. That's the main step here. Yeah, and then the next step is going to be, we're going to feed that list of review data into AI again for sentiment analysis. And this is the part that's a little bit more of an art than a science, right? We're going to delve in and use my custom template that I use in all my ChatGPT prompting, which I use on my company. So we'll jump into that and we'll use that template as the base. But in terms of building up this prompt, we'll do that together until we get to the desired result. I kind of want, like I said before, just sort of a report that we then send to my Gmail. So the idea here is, from a user flow, it's going to be like, cool, I've made a list. Come here, grab a link, copy the link. I'm going to then do a post request via something called Postman, which is very easy. I'm going to basically just paste that link into here and hit send. That's going to trigger the whole make automation, which we haven't built yet, but it's going to trigger this. That's going to do all those steps inside this purple box that we just went through. And then once that's done, that's going to send a nice, awesome review of the data for me as a nice sentiment analysis report, and then I'm going to receive that in my Gmail. We could even do something cooler and like post it to my WhatsApp so I get it as a nice WhatsApp, but I think it's probably going to be nicer in an email, actually. So, all right, that is the overview. And like I said, I've kind of started to build this, but I haven't built the whole thing out. So this is going to be a journey with me, and I'm sure I'm going to get stuck at some points, but that's part of the fun. Hey guys, if you're digging this kind of content, then you might want to consider subscribing to the newsletter. So me and my business partner, Mitch, we run a company called Automato, and we've just built a 7-day completely free newsletter course, which delves into all these things that we're going over in the video right now. AI, automation, how to think about the space, all the cool things that are coming up, and how to build awesome things, essentially. So get it below in the description, sign up, it's completely free, and level up your game. All right, so let's build this thing. So this is how I tend to structure my workflow. First, I use a Pomodoro timer, so let's go for 55 minutes. Maybe we can do it in less. So I'm going to set what I need to do. This is just my general planning, but I've got my Airbnb solution here. So I'm going to kind of create a place to jot down any thoughts, any problems and stuff that I encounter here so that they're all centralized in one place. And then I am going to hit focus, and there we go. So let's see what we can get done in 55 hours. I can focus pretty well for this length of time and then have a little break. Sometimes I just keep going if I'm in the flow, but this is just a nice way to structure your workflow. So we have this as our sketchpad, and let's dive into the automation. So let's not concern ourselves with everything to the left of the purple box here, which is our creating the wish list and the triggering. We'll come back to this later. So let's just start with the make automation, which is step one, which is basically getting these URLs. So like, how do we get this nice share URL? So let's jump in and build it. So you may be aware of the HTTP module, which is just a basic module. It's kind of a staple. So let's go down here to make a request. Now we're going to hit the URL that I just pasted into here, which you can see has got this like unique share ID here. It's just a GET request. And let's not bother about parsing or anything, because this is not going to work, because I tried this earlier. So if we hit OK, and then just run this module only, we're going to get this 403 forbidden. Now, this is one of the problems that you're going to run into when you're trying to access or even scrape things from bigger platforms, is they have a lot of kind of security measures in place. So this is basically saying, because let me just expand on this a little bit. If we just take this URL and I just show you again, if I put this through a browser and I'm not logged in, it works, right? So why is it working in the browser and it's not working from Make as an HTTP request? Well, the browser usually sends a bunch of headers to kind of say to the server, we're hitting an Airbnb server here, right? to say to the server, like, I'm a human, I'm coming from a Mozilla Firefox browser, my computer is a Mac, and there are a bunch of headers that basically used to create what's called a fingerprint of you to make sure that you're human. Now, in some instances, it's very easy to basically mimic that behavior from here by replicating the headers in here. So, you can, instead of coming from, we are basically a make.com client now, which is a kind of a requester of information. That is a big red flag for servers. They oftentimes, depending on the site, they're like, okay, we don't want to accept anything from a kind of bot or an automation tool. So you can, in some instances, replicate what the browser is sending. So you can start saying, oh, I'm coming from Mozilla Firefox or Chrome. Now, I've tried this, and I cannot get it to work. So Airbnb have got some crazy security going on here. So instead of spending a lot of time trying to figure out what headers I need, what I tend to do if I'm just getting stuck and I want to just keep in the flow is I use a tool called Scrape Ninja. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to basically go to a URL and it acts as if you were a human. And more than that, in terms of the headers and stuff, it actually fires up a sort of a browser on its side and actually goes to the site. And it even takes a picture of a screenshot of the site for you. So let's just use that and it will make a little bit more sense. So let's get rid of this delete module. And we're going to use Scrape Ninja. And we're going to scrape as a real browser. Now, I'm sure there are other ways to do it, especially the more advanced of you watching this might be thinking, oh, you just need to add this header or whatever. The point is, I don't want to spend too much time doing this, and this works, and it's free. You get like between 50 to 100 calls a month, so for my purposes, it's fine. If you have more time, then feel free to mess around in the HTTP module and figure out like what you need to do, but for the purposes of this is going to work fine. So we're going to put the URL that we have got, the share URL here, and we are just going to run it. And I'm going to show you kind of proof that this is spinning up its own little Chrome instance and actually going to visit the site. So let's go here. It's also going to pull all the raw HTML for us as well, which we're going to use and analyze with AI in the next step. So here we go. We've got a success, response status 200. Here's a screenshot. Let's have a look at it. So this kind of proves that this thing, come on mouse. Oh, junky screenshot. Okay, sometimes it takes the screenshot a little bit too early, but hopefully it should still bring the raw data back. Yeah. Okay, so we've got all the raw data, which is the stuff that we need. So this is just a huge, as you can see, look how freaking small the scroll bar is. It's just a huge data representation of this page, and we can double check. There's a mosquito here. We can double check by just kind of searching for something. So let's search for like Lower Manhattan, this word here, in the HTML response. Lower Man, here we go. It's literally right there. Lower Manhattan. So we can see it exists. East Side, Lower Manhattan. So East Side, Lower Manhattan. Okay, we're getting essentially this, which is the DOM of the page. So awesome. We can now use that to pull the links out of. So let's go back. Oh my gosh, I'm jumping around everywhere. Okay. So the next step, now that we've successfully got what we need, is we're going to jump into OpenAI module to extract this. Now, again, I'm being a bit lazy here. You could use all sorts of parsing modules to use regex and stuff to get this out, but because ChatGPT is so cheap these days and it's so quick, I just use it. Like, this is what AI is for, right? Like to speed up and make our quality of life as developers easier. So why not use it? And this is a very simple use case, but later in the flow, we're going to use AI, as we mentioned earlier, for a bit more of the complexity, the analysis. So here, we're just going to create a very simple completion. The model is GPT-4o system. I haven't used Mini yet. I'm not really sure what it's all about, but for now, let's set the max tokens to 0, just in case we need to pass a lot in. In fact, do you know what? This HTML payload is massive and it has all these tags. So instead of passing that to OpenAI directly, let's in fact trim it a little bit. So we're going to use a text parser. I'm going to use the HTML to text parser. And this basically just strips all those tags and HTML kind of information out of it, because we're basically just looking for the href or the A tags so that we can go to the next part of the flow. So in here, we're going to select the thing that we want to parse, which, as you can see here, is this target website. There's actually a typo here. Target website raw response, and it starts with an HTML tag, so I know that's it. Let's hit that. Let's rename it as well. So we're just going to make our life a bit easier when we come back to this automation later. So what is it called? We are basically parsing HTML to text. Here, let's rename this one as well. We're basically getting HTML from Airbnb share link. There we go. And then from this module, we can then connect up this module and then write a little prompt, which is going to be the result of this prompt. We hope is going to just pull these. How many links are in here now? 3, 4. Let's go to this one. So it's just nice and easy. 3. Yeah, just 3 links. So let's do that. Now we again have just going to use a chat completion. We're not going to use an assistant or an agent here. We might use that for the further step. But for messages, okay, let's define a role. It's always good too. So message 1, system role, we're going to say, you are the best parser of HTML information on the planet. It's always good to big up your AI. This is actually proven. Your role is to sift through a large HTML payload, or response, I should call it, response, and extract Airbnb property listings, listing URLs. Do your best. And then, so that's the system prompt, which is basically a primer. And then we're going to use a user prompt, which is essentially what you would kind of normally type into ChatGPT and inside that interface. And we're just going to say here, extract the Airbnb property listing URLs from this page. And then we're going to give it this from this HTML response, not the page, sorry. And then we're going to specify how we want the AI to return. So usually you want to tell your AI to return in JSON so that it's easily manageable from the subsequent steps. So we're going to say, always return your response as a JSON string like this. So you want to give it an example. So I'm going to do some JSON here. So we're going to open just a JSON. Oh, schism. In fact, it's going to be an array. So it's going to be an array, which are the square brackets of objects. Let's just make kind of 2 objects here. And we'll just do a bit of indentation. Okay, so the first object, we're just going to give it a property of URL. And we're going to just kind of give it some sort of sample URL here. So HTTPS, and then we're going to call this literally sample URL to give it a very clear indication of what it's doing. And we'll just copy that here, and we'll just call this sample URL 1 and sample URL 2. So that's how we want our data to be received, because then we can iterate through it with the iterator module. Pardon. And yeah, so I think that's good. Let's test that out, save it. And we've got the URL target in here. Okay, so we should run this, we should parse it, and then we should get a nice array of 3 objects of the URLs for here. So let's do this now. Oh, okay. The model's maximum content length. All right. Yeah, so you passed in too much data. The maximum content length is 128, and I passed in 168. Okay. So let's see how we can solve this. We're basically passing too much. The payload is too big. Oh, of course it's too big because I passed in. Okay. So right here, where I'm like, pass this response, I passed in, if you can see here, I'm hovering over it. I passed in the raw HTML. That's why it's too big. So I actually ignored what I did. We want to remove that and pass in the parsed response, which should be significantly less tokens. Let's try that again. Lovely. All right, so what are we on? Almost there. Pretty nice. Okay, so let's pull this into a code editor so we can like inspect it a little bit easier. Oh my gosh, my mouse is freaking out. Have we got VS Code open? Nope. Let's open up item. Let's open up my code. I've just moved this, so this is kind of annoying. Let's go from my company, ls, YouTube. Here we go. YouTube, I think I've already got Airbnb Review Sentiment, ls. I was messing around with Python before. I'm going to get into some cool Python and JavaScript stuff later, but for now we don't need it. So in fact, let's jump out and let's remove everything inside this CD. Yeah, okay, so let's make it again. I'm just going to call it Airbnb. I'm going to CD into it. If you don't know what this is, don't worry. It's not really relevant. I'm just making a nice place for myself. Now we can open it. Okay. We're just going to paste that payload into here because it's a little bit easier to see. Nice. You can see we've got an array of objects here and we are getting these rooms. So if I think we can command click and check that these are the right ones. Yeah, East Side, Lower Manhattan. Cozy bedroom. Cozy bedroom. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so it's got all the stuff that we need. Let's pull this here. So you might have noticed in the response that GPT, or OpenAI, I should say, was doing something a bit funky. Let's have a look again. I'm going to zoom in. Check this out. It's wrapped the entire array in a delimiter, which is basically a JSON signifier, which is used in Markdown syntax, which OpenAI uses under the hood. That's why if you might have seen this before when you're trying to get it to respond to you as JSON, but it sometimes wraps it in this, which is annoying because it can cause errors when we're trying to parse and extract on the next step. So what we need to do here is always tell our friend JSON. So always tell it to. Okay, firstly, we're going to use negative reinforcement, which is not that effective, but it's useful. So we're going to say never return your JSON wrapped in Markdown delimiters. Delimiters, I think that's the way you spell it. So for example, like this. So I'm basically going to just grab what it did and say, oi, bad doggy, don't do that. So I'm going to paste that in here so that it knows. And then just to reiterate, because there's a phenomenon with large language model prompting whereby towards the end of the prompt, it kind of takes a little bit more notice of it, or the commands towards the end of the prompt take a little bit more precedence. So the start is very important and the end is very important, and the middle it kind of tends to ignore. So just if you want something done with a large language model prompt, make sure you reiterate it at the end, even if you said it multiple times. So I'm going to just say here. To reiterate, you should respond like this, and then give it a desired response. Wait, shit, not that like that. Like this. In fact, no, I'm going to give it the actual response now without the delimiters. Yeah, so you just got to be very, very explicit with these models. Otherwise, they get a little bit confused, bless them. But that doesn't detract from how bloody powerful they are. So let's try that again. I'm going to finish this banana. Here we go. So with a little bit more explicit prompting, we get the result that we want. We can now guard for this later. So we can set up a check in the next module. Because sometimes, even if you've been super explicit with it, it will still sometimes do that, which is annoying, but you can guard for it. But for the purpose of this video, we won't do it because it'll take a while. But just know that you can. All right, so awesome. So where are we? Let's skip back to Whimsical and see where we are. We've now successfully got all the URLs and we've used AI to extract them. We now need to do a bit of a loop and then jump into this hidden API section. So in fact, yeah, before we start looping, this is a good segue into hidden APIs. Now, what the hell is a hidden API? I'd be thinking, what is this? What's he talking about? You may have heard of them. Maybe you've used them. If so, great. But with Airbnb, they're especially interesting because Airbnb uses something called URL encoding, or it JSON encodes. How do I describe this well? When you use that API, it does a GET request, but then it basically encodes a bunch of configuration for what you want to get out of that GET request into the query parameter. So it looks bonkers. It's base 64 encoded. So we have to do a little bit of manipulation here. We have to do a bit of data transfer from base 64 back to normal text to UTF-8 and see what is happening, and then inject a few things in from the URL that we just got. It gets a little bit complicated, so I'm going to just show you it because this is where the real value of this lies. So let's jump over, just as an example, into what's happening on the back end when we go into one of these properties. So let's jump in here. Like I said before, if you wanted to scrape this data, it's going to be a bit tricky because, like I mentioned, we get 6 out of here, and then to get the rest, we have to click in and then check this out. 64 reviews, right? So it's not going to load them all. Watch this. Watch the size of this bar, which indicates more are being loaded. See that? See that little glitch there? See that glitch? And another one? So Airbnb by default only loads the first 24. So this poses a problem for scraping. So a little crash course on scraping. Scraping is just another way to get data if a platform or service that you're wanting to extract information from does not offer a public API. In this instance, Airbnb does offer an API. So you might be thinking, why don't we just use the API to get this data? The problem is, like many other platforms, Airbnb are being super stingy with access to their API. So this is why you need to use scraping. So the reason, I don't know why Airbnb are being so stingy. They're currently only letting in like certain companies. If you're earning a certain amount, you've got to do all this. You've got to jump through a million hoops. So it essentially renders it useless to try and apply. Just from what I've seen online, it just is impossible. But we don't have to despair because this is very common. Like a lot of companies now are kind of being a lot more stringent with their API access. Another example off the top of my head is Upwork. I'm trying to make some really cool stuff in Upwork. Like, for example, when somebody sends me a message, I want to be able to like send a webhook and see that message and get it via the API and do cool things with it. But Upwork, again, are just crazy. So APIs are the first port of call when you're trying to get information, but often, and especially nowadays, it's hard to get access. So the next step is scraping. Now, what is scraping? scraping is just simulating kind of human behavior, like what we're doing right now. Like if I can see it with my eyes, if I can see these reviews and I can click these buttons and open more and I can scroll and I can trigger loading of more information, then scraping in various levels of complexity seeks to emulate this. Now, it gets a bit harder on sites like this because they use what's called like client-side rendering. So it gets a bit tricky, like I'm saying here, like when you start going into here, it's quite clever. It only actually asks the server for the first 24, and then based on your user behavior, i.e. scrolling, it then will ask periodically for more and more and more. But there are ways around this, these tricky sites and these behaviors. Because if you were to just ping this with an HTTP request via a scraper, you can run into many problems. One, these sites don't particularly like you scraping them, so they have a lot of like anti-bot checks. So you need to have like perfect fingerprint with your request, which can sometimes be tricky because you need a cookie, you need an API key, and all this kind of stuff. So it's tricky. So I've actually messed around with this a little bit on Airbnb, and the good news is that on a lot of these client-side rendered sites, such as this one, they have hidden APIs. So what does that mean? And we're going to jump into it into a second, but it basically means they have APIs that they call from your browser, and they return really nicely structured JSON payloads that if you know how to get into, you can call those hidden APIs yourself from an app or an integration that you're making, and manipulate the data to receive those payloads and skip over this step of having to manually scrape a site and even having to use crazy testing frameworks like Selenium or Puppeteer to even, simulate scrolling and getting more results, which is a common technique as well. So if you can get the raw JSON that is being asked for and received in your browser, and you know how to use that, then you can just straight up ping the data resource that Airbnb is doing on your behalf from your browser. So let me just reload this page, and we're going to go deep into the land of Chrome DevTools. So let's make this, shizzle me snizzles. All right. So what we're interested in is the network tab. Let's close this. Probably do another video on how to boss the network tab, but for now, let's just reload the page. And we're going to now see a bunch of back and forth requests between the client, which is our browser, and the server, which is Airbnb. Now you can see there's a bunch of stuff here. We're only interested in certain things. So what we can do, if you were building or extracting from any other platform, you just need to have a good search here. And as you dig around, you can use this filter search bar here to find what you want, but you'll get better at it over time. So we can just search for review here, and it kind of narrows things down. So, all right, let's start digging in. We're going to look, this is kind of like what's happening in terms of the request. So we can see all these request URLs. We've got like a mustache here, which is some sort of templating mustache. Oh no, that's some sort of caching thing. And then we've got some very interesting large URLs. Now we want to look at the response and then sift through these. So we can see, okay, this is some sort of JavaScript which we can see, .js, and you can see a bunch of minified JavaScript. We're not going to get anything useful out of this, so we can kind of ignore this. But this stuff looks like JSON, and this stuff looks like JSON. This is pretty big. So let's have a look in here for review, and we can see, sick, I can get some stuff. Let's see if I can get the stuff that I need. So I'm getting some metadata here, which is like, review count. This is not the stuff that I actually want, though. I actually want, the text review content from the guest, which I'm not getting here. So this is mainly just review data, but it's metadata. Data about data. So this is not going to be what we need. If we go to this one though, which also looked interesting. Where was it? Here. Let's look again. Review. Is this what we need? Here we go. Reviewer. We've got a first name. Interesting. Review highlight. Stayed a few nights. What else we got? Bosh. Jackpot. This is what we need. We found ourselves in a bit of a pickle after arriving at our hotel, only to find it was a bloody building site. This is the heart of the matter that I'm trying to get to with this automation. This is the truth, right? The aggregate review score, i.e., let's just close this for a second. This, look at this, 5-star. What the hell is going on here? This is a 5-star review place, and the first thing we see is some chick describing how it's a freaking building site. So you can see, just as a quick aside here as well, the one reason I wanted to build this, aside from saving time and using AI to get to the heart of the matter, is I don't really believe reviews online anymore. And this is to do with incentives. And I experienced this personally, so I can kind of attest to it. When a guest stays at somewhere on Airbnb, if they have a shitty experience, they are incentivized in some way or another to not explicitly bash the host, to talk shit about them in the review, because they fear the recompense. That's not even a word. They fear the return response from the host, because the host can respond to your reviews and say, this person was a asshole or whatever. And look, if you're a guest on Airbnb, like me, for example, I've been on Airbnb like for 10 years, and I've got a pretty squeaky clean profile. You're incentivized as a guest to not tell the full truth, because if you do, the host is going to come back at you and kind of muddy and poop all over your profile and make you look like a less desirable person to any other hosts that you want to stay with in the future, and vice versa. It works that way. So, and there's a lot of sneaky things on Airbnb. Like you'll find that when you stay at a house, the host usually wants to take the information, the communication channel off Airbnb straight away and onto WhatsApp, so that they can, be a bit more loose-tongued. And that's good and it's bad in some ways, but the idea is that you're just not seeing the full truth on Airbnb for those reasons I just mentioned. So, like, if we jump back in, this is just super interesting, right? We see a chick complaining that it's a freaking building site. Let's just refresh this and get back to that reviews section. Where was it? There we go. We arrived. It was a bloody building site, but in the end, this blessing was a disguise, because we ended up staying with them in their fantastic brownstone in Brooklyn. So interesting, like they gave a 5-star, but they ended up staying in a different place. And like, maybe that was good, but maybe you don't want to stay in a different place. Do you know what I mean? So this is the kind of stuff that AI can get for you. So we've successfully got the request here. So let's have a look at it in the headers tab. So this is the request URL right here. We can see it's using get. We've got a 200 response, which is okay. There's a bunch of response headers from the server, which we don't need to worry about. So let's collapse it. And then these are the headers that your browser is sending along with this URL in order to kind of say, hey, I'm coming from the browser to get past cross-origin resource policy. It's passing a cookie, passing a bunch of stuff. It's passing a Airbnb API key, which I found is quite useful. So let's just do one thing. You might be thinking, oh, sick. Okay, maybe I can just get this payload easily, right? So let's first try it out from the browser. You think, okay, I might have the cookie here. This might work. Bosh, this is not working. Let's pretty print this. Response not successful, 400. We're getting an invalid API key. So this is a clue, like, maybe we need to send a header with an API key. So that's what we're going to replicate now over in our testing client, our testing HTTP client, which is called Postman, which I highly recommend you get into for testing, especially if you're getting into web scraping and automating, because we're going to see later that way I'm going to trigger this whole automation through Postman. But you can see here, we can't just ping this URL and get what we want. There's some extra things that we need, right? Hey guys, if you are enjoying the video so far, then please consider giving me a like and a subscribe, because then you're going to get more of these videos in your feed. It's going to help me out, and I think you're going to enjoy the content that's coming, so much appreciated. Cheers. Back to the video. There's a cookie here. Maybe we need that. Maybe we don't. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But I want to also just focus on the crazy looking nature of this URL. So let's put this over into the code editor, and we can expect it a bit more together. Okay, so let's look at this, right? We've got the standard part of the URL, but can you see how it differs already? So it's using the same domain, www.airbnb.com, but you can see here it's /API. So this is the hidden API. This is Airbnb's own API that they use. And then it's version 3 of the API, and then it's using this interesting path or route called stays PDP reviews query. Interesting. Then it's got a huge string here, and then this question mark right here signifies where the start of all the query parameters are going to start. So from this point onwards to the end, which is freaking long, we're going to have a series of key value pairs. So the key is on the left of the equals, so operation names, and then we can see that's operation name, stays PDB review query, plus is a delineator, so it's like a separator between one and another. So that's end of this one, and then we go to locale equals English, currency euros, that's what my account is in, and then variables equals what on earth is this bonkers stuff. So this goes all the way to the end, which is huge. So this is what's called URL encoded or JSON encoded data. So there's plenty of tools we can use online to extract this, but let's use our friendly neighborhood tool, ChatGPT, and just say like, what is this? You know? So we can say, what is this? Or I can say, can you decode this? Thanks, mate. And let's see what he comes back with. So it's nice. It gives you some context, which is very helpful when you're learning. This appears to be a URL encoded JSON string. Interesting. Let's decode it. Nicely formatted. I've got a frog in my throat today. Sorry, guys. All right, beautiful. So let's look at this section here. So this string, this crazy string, basically decodes down into UTF-8, I believe, and it shows you what's going on. So this ID here is interesting. It's a base 64 or encoded representation of the room ID. So this, if we copy it, actually resolves down to that number there, and we can I can prove it to you. What is this? Oh, fuck. Oops. Sorry, mate. I want to... Sometimes when I press copy on my keyboard, it just doesn't work. Either my keyboard's bugged out. Stop. I want to say... What does this resolve to? Just give it that. Here we go. Look, it resolves to stay listing, and then 143, the ID of the room. So there's a lot of interesting things going on here, and it's basically to do with how their backend API expects data. So, okay, so now that we've decoded this, right? Check it out. We can see essentially the configuration of how to call this API. Now, we've unwrapped this. We've decoded it, so we're going to need to encode it again. So that's going to be part of what we do in the automation. But let's just first have a look at this. Interesting part. My mouse is bugged out, man. Interesting part is the limit. So like I said before, Airbnb is set right here to only call 24 because it saves on network requests. And this is what they expect you to look at, the first 24 maybe. So the limit here, but maybe we can mess with this and set it to 100 or set it to 1,000 in case there are big ones that we need to get all the data from. So we can mess with this and then encode it again and then send it off to the API how it expects it, which is like this, all encoded. First 24, sorting preference, like the check in there. You can do some really cool stuff here. You can basically see exactly how that API is expecting it. Number of pets. What? So this is very interesting. So what we're going to do is we're going to want to set this limit to a lot more than 24 so that we can make sure that we're getting all the data at all times. And the offset is going to be 0, but the first, I think we also want to set that to 100, possibly. All right, I just took a little coffee break. It was the end of my 55 minutes, so now we are back on another session. So let's start making this a bit more interesting. We now need to figure out a method for taking one of these formed URL strings and being able to inject different rooms into it, because that's going to form the basis of our looping. So how do we get this inside here? So only one part of this URL is encoded, right? So we basically don't need to worry about anything else. So we can, for now, just grab this part of the URL, which is the JSON encoded part, and let's just decode it. So we're going to go over to a decoding tool, paste it in here. We're gonna decode it. All right, so what do we get? Let's put this back into our editor so we can easily see it. Decoded variable value. Bosh. Okay, so a lot of stuff here. Let's just try and split this out to make it nicer to read. Okay. There's the extensions which we actually... Interesting. Is that also encoded? Extensions. Yeah, okay. Oops. Okay, so the extensions is also freaking encoded as well. Yeah, all right. So but that's what we get out. We get basically decoded variable and extensions values. All right. So extensions looks something like this. Okay. Now we can start to look at it with a bit more clarity. So the idea is, as part of our automation, we want to be decoding and encoding. And we decode, we inject, and then we re-encode. So the thing that we want to inject in really is this ID, which represents a base 64 string encoding of this integer value. So this is where it gets a bit crazy. So you can see how hard Airbnb are trying to, stop you from getting into this stuff. But you can do it. You can do it. This is the awesome thing. You can sneak around and get what you want. We basically need this to say stay listing 516.19.634. So there's actually, this is interesting. We've got to decode the URL encoding, grab the ID, change that from base 64 to UTF-8, inject our room ID in, re-encode it back to base 64, which exists inside a now unwrapped URL encoded part, and then re-encode that back to URL encoding, and then fire off the request. So levels, I know there's levels here, but it's very interesting. So essentially, as part of our flow, we want to replace this, right? So let's replace it. And just say to GPT, okay, now base 64 encode this. Check it out. Looks pretty legit, right? Whenever you see something that ends with equals, it's a surefire sign that the string you are looking at is base 64 encoded. So this is now going to work. And if I just double check and just say, okay, now decode this, which is what we just made, and it should say stay listing 516. Yeah, so we've got what we need here, which is awesome, right? So this is the gold that we need to inject back in. So let's come back here. Here's the ID. So we're going to change that ID. Bosh. Awesome. So now we can like just stitch this back together again. And there we go. So now we need to take this and URL encode it. So let's do that. Pretty mad. So URL encode. Encode that. So let's grab that. Go back to our code. And we're back to the URL encoded string. Let's basically now we can go to this part of the string. So variables and everything, and we know that everything after is the variables value and the extensions value. So we're just going to select all of that, paste that, and then just stitch it all back together. Oh, now this, my friends, should work. I'm very excited. I've not done this yet. Let's see. Invalid GraphQL request. At least one of query or operation ID needs to be present. So we've ballsed this up somewhere. I think I just had an extra like plus or something somewhere and just put that here. So now I've just pasted that into Postman and hit it, and we seem to be good. So if I again look for comments, 70, excellent location. That doesn't seem to be enough comments. I would expect more. Why only 70? What is going on here? Why only 70? Okay guys, I'm back. Had a little bit of a break, had a little bit of a rummage around the API. I also had some food. It's important to relax and eat because this is brain hungry work. Okay, so let's go over what has changed. All right, so the API can only return a maximum of 50 every time, which I figured out, which is interesting. You can see it as a good or bad thing, but let me just show you what I'm talking about. If we go and have a look at the variables encoded information and stick it here, and you can see we get the JSON data, right, which is the config. Now, I've been playing around with this limit integer here, this limit number, and the offset. So anytime you start to add above 50, Airbnb only gives you 50 results maximum. Now you can get past this by doing an offset, which basically says start at item number whatever. So say if you have 1,000 reviews, you could do chunks of 50. So how many chunks will that be? I don't know. Maths isn't good. It's like 10 or something. A bunch of chunks. No, it'd be 20, wouldn't it? Bunch of chunks, and then you could use that to get all the reviews. But to be honest, for the purposes of this first version of the app, I'm not bothered. I'm going to just be happy with getting 50 of the most recent reviews, so I won't do an offset. 50 of the most recent, and that's it. I think that's enough. That's still saving a lot of time. In the future, if I want to make this more robust and more complete, then I will do an offset, but it's just adding too much complexity for what I'm trying to achieve here, which is, I think 50 is okay. So the next step now then is we're going to attempt to write an AI module that does all that stuff that we were doing, all that extracting, all this inception level of base 64 and URL encoding back upwards. We're going to ask AI to do all that for us. Now, again, you can do this manually and make, but like I mentioned earlier, if AI can do it like that, then why the hell not? So let's jump in to make.com. So to refresh our memory, we're getting the links from here, the wish list, which is this one. We're passing the HTML out of it, and we're asking GPT, give us the links. Okay, so we're at that point. So right now we need to add a iterator to iterate over this array that we got out here. So we're going to set this up, and we're going to give it an array. First we need to parse it actually, because this is actually of type string. So it's not ready to be iterated over yet. We need to turn it into kind of an object. So let's delete this. Let's go to parse JSON again. JSON, parse JSON. There we go. So we're going to give it this result right here. And let's give it a useful name. So parse GPT output. And then after that, we can then do our iterator, and we're going to give that the output from here, but we first need to do a manual run so that make can figure out what the data looks like. So let's save. Transformer should not be the last route. Always complaining about that, but it's fine. Run anyway, come on. Okay, here we go. So we parsed it. Nice. We're getting all these nice bundles out perfectly. So make did a good job there. What we want to do, if we just look at the data, is we first want to create a module, which an AI module, which basically extracts these out, which are the room IDs. So there's a few steps here. Let's jump out into Whimsical and just make a new little fresh point. We want to, let's get a sample URL so we know what we're working with. We'll just go to here. Just for examples, purposes, text. All right. So this is what we're cooking with on each iteration. What do we want to do with AI? We want to say, extract the room ID, which comes after rooms / So it's pretty easy. I think AI is going to handle that pretty well. Then the next step, 64, encode that room ID. So if we just go and get an example from our testing suite, there we go, something like this. And again, just have that here for reference. Okay, so I gathered my thoughts. There's a step we missed here. So before we base encode the room ID, first what we want to do is tell GPT that we need to follow this syntax, which is like this. Follow this syntax. It needs to go stay listing and then room ID, right? That's what we need to follow. The way that we do that is we're going to concatenate two strings together, which is going to be basically stay listing as the first string, and then the second string is going to be the room ID. Then once we've done that, then now we can base 64 encode that. And then replace, or I'll just put inject into our base get template. What is our base get template? It looks like this. Da-da, dun, dun. Absolutely huge. Okay, I think I missed a step. Before we inject into our base template, let's not think about that for a second. We need to work with and give the model the decoded JSON in the query parameter, which is this stuff. So just to remind you, remember it looks like this, and that basically resolves down into this. So let me just grab it from here because I think it has the settings that I need. So this is going to be a bit of static JSON that the model can use every time. And the only thing that we need to rip out and replace is this. So we're doing a limit of 50. Oh my gosh, why is this formatting so weird? Okay, try to ignore the formatting, but we're doing a limit of 50, an offset of 50, and first should be just 50 as well, because like I said, 50 is the maximum we can get. I don't think we need all the other variables, but we'll leave it in there for now. It doesn't make a difference, but the most important one is the sorting preference, most recent. That's what I care about. So we're going to base 64 encode that, and then we're going to now inject into our template, which is above. So this is what we're looking at here. I'll make it bold. And then once we've done that, my friends, we are going to, now we need to URL encode that. So that's up. So that is going to become this. So we inject in here, and then we URL encode to get this. And then very simply, we can now inject it into our template. So that's a step too early. So this goes like this. This goes here. I'm going to call this URL encoding. And then we can inject. Inject the variables into our get template, which we shall bring back from Postman, which is basically this. Let's get a big text here. So I'm just going to remove the variables so it's easier to see. And we don't want to get the extensions. So Bosh, I want to inject here. Right, I think that's the flow that we're going to try to get GPT to do. Feels doable, but let's see how it goes in practice, and I hope that makes sense. We'll come back to this if we need to. So let's do it. So let's jump to make, and we are going to open up a GPT module. Completion is fine for now. You maybe want to turn this into assistant if this is more of a permanent thing. But let's use GPT-4, max token 0. Add a system message. We want to say, you are an expert data extractor and your role is to follow a set of instructions, and your role involves extracting data from URL strings, encoding and decoding. Pay close attention at all times. Okay, that's the system prompt, and then we are going to add the user prompt here. So if we just jump back to whimsical reference, we're going to say, okay, your task starts with a URL string, which will always look like this. And then we're going to give it the string. Your first job is to extract the room ID, which is the integer that appears after rooms /. Okay, so that's the first part of the task. You will then create a variable called, let's call it, then create a temporary variable called stay listing. In this variable, you will store the result of concatenating two strings. Concatenation just means sticking together. The first part of the string will always be stay listing : yeah? And I'm going to specifically say ignore my quotation marks. Stay listing. The second part of the string will be the room ID you extracted from the URL. So for example, and then we're going to give it the example, stay listing. In fact, let's just change this to look like an actual variable, stay listing. I wonder if it can do this, if it can hold temporary variables. I'm pretty sure it can because it uses Python a lot of the time, so I'm pretty sure it can do this. So stay listing equals, and then we're going to do a string, stay listing bosh, right. Then you will take this stay listing variable and base 64 encode it. Storing it in a new variable called stay listing base 64 encoded. Fuck it, let's be really explicit. Okay, so now we've base 64 encoded it. I'm going to now feed the model this JSON template. So we're going to say inject stay listing base 64 encoded variable here. So this, we're now going to say, look, you need to inject that into this little bit of JSON. Now you will inject that variable into the following JSON string. If this works first time, I'm going to be very surprised, but we'll see. I'm trying to be as explicit as possible. Again, we can say replacing this. So like that. I'm just going to go back to the system. I'm going to say, think through your task step. Think and go through your task step by step. This seems to work on step-based role prompting. Okay, so we're saying basically, now inject it in here. Now we need to URL encode that. Now, no, it's not the last part. Now, wait. You will need to inject the variable into a following JSON string, save this into a new variable called injected JSON. Now, take the injected JSON variable and URL encode it. So this is now the variables query parameter encoded, and we can give that here as an example. So now take the injected JSON variable and URL encode it like this. I'm going to say saving it into a new variable called encoded JSON. Now finally, not finally, so many steps for this poor thing. Now, I need to give it another template. This template. Let's get rid of that. Copy it. Copy it. Now, take the encoded JSON variable and inject it here where it says here replacing this, inject here. Save the result into a final result variable. Return the result variable as a string. Oh la la, let's see if that works. Okay, so we're going to save that. So what do we expect? We expect to run this. It's going to iterate 4 times. In fact, let's just get rid of some of these. So we're just going to iterate once. Refresh. Can you get the new share link just in case it's new? Copy. See what happens. I'll be so surprised if this works first time, but I think we're going to get a decent amount of the way there. So we should just get one listing out of this. It's doing a lot of thinking, which is good. It means it's really thinking through it step by step. Result. Okay. JSON string before injection. Encode the JSON string. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad. Inject the JSON into the API URL. Replace inject here with this. Let's see the final URL. Oh, interesting. It's cut off the extension. It's not bad. It's got a decent amount of the way. It's got me the variables, but it's not got me the extensions parameter, which is what I need. But let's just check how this even looks when we decode it. It's really not bad for a first pass. Let's decode this. Not bad. This looks good, most recent. Okay, let's check if this is a representation of this. So I'm going to say base 64 encode this. Yes, something's bugged out there. Oh man. I kept static testing data in here, which is so dumb. All right, so that's why it was looking different. When I say your task starts with a URL string, which I'm going to say with this URL string. Then we need to inject it right here. So it's going to be the value from the iterator, I believe. Yeah, the value right here. Okay, I think that's it. That should work decently now. So now we're actually going to be looking at this ID, which we expect to resolve into that as a base 64 encoded version of it. So let's do OK, save, run again. Yes. So the iterator is now getting out 101, which is what we expect, 101. Awesome. This is exciting, so it's doing a lot of thinking. I'm actually quite proud of this prompt. We wrote it first pass and it's almost working. Let's check it out, let's check it out, let's check it out, let's check it out. What's the result? It's going to go through step by step. I need to modify this, but what is the basic encoding of that? Wow. That looks... Let's just compare them side by side. So that's what it thinks. That's what it thinks, and then that's what... Oh, not good, not good, not good. Oh shit, because I'm doing it wrong. This needs to be so silly. I need to say base encode. Shit. Base 64 encode this, and then I need to do the right syntax. I forgot my own syntax. Bloody hell. Let's see what this comes back as. Oh my lordy, it looks good. Ends in starts in U3RH and ends in NQ. Bosh! I forgot the equals, but yes. Sick. Okay, so this is working. Injection, injection, injection. Final result. Okay, let's just download the bundles again. And just stick that into our editor here. Certainly. Okay, so let's get rid of this shite. All this fluff. Will be this. Okay. This is looking all right. So it looks to be a decently formed string here. Oh my lord, this is exciting. Okay, so we're going to ping this URL given to us by GPT. And it's going to go to the hidden API for this listing and should return 5 reviews. And the first one should be like, I had a great stay. So let's go test this out on Postman. Paste that into there. Save it. Hit send. Amazing. Wait, let me check. Oh, fuck. Oh no, it's not working. Celebrating too soon. What? Reviews count 5. That seems right. Oh, bollocks. The offset's on 50. Okay, this is just our mistake. That's easy to solve. Let's just go back. Because basically, if the offset's 50, it's going to return nothing because there's only 5 reviews. It's going past the limit. Okay, good to know. So we need to just go back here and modify this a little bit. So we want to say the offset is not 50, mate. It's 0. Oh, exciting times. Let's run that again. I love this part of the project when you're getting like really close to the final result. Come on. Come on. Come on. Okay, awesome. Result. The final result string. Show me the money. Oh my lord. Looks good. Smells good. I've got a nose for these things. This smells like a very tasty little morsel. Okay, so what do we expect? We expect 5 reviews. There's no offset anymore. We fixed that. Send. Oh my god. This worked. Let's just get the delimiter. Where the fuck is it? Reviewer, that's the way that we can count easily. 1 of 5. Awesome. Let's just double check that they actually are the ones that we want to get. Let's look at comment. I had a great stay, which is the first one. Yes, you did, Julianne. You had a great stay. Guys, this is a hidden gem. So sick. Una persona muy disponible y agradable. Awesome. So the great thing is GPT is going to be able to understand all the translations as well, which is nice. Okay, this is amazing. So now all we need to do is rename this. So we're going to say, what does it do? How do we represent this? We want to say extraction I'm going to just call it like URL extraction decoding encoding. A lot of stuff going on there, but can you see how much time that saves you? Like that would have taken a million modules and so much regex and so much pain in the ass. You just do it in one GPT call and it probably costs like 1 cent. Maybe even less with GPT-4. It's pretty, GPT-4, I should say, it's pretty cheap. Okay, so sick. I'm really happy with this so far. So now we just need to tidy up the response because as you can see, it's bringing out all this yada, yada, yada. So I need to just say, oi, 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 give me just the final URL. Return the final result variable as, okay, only return the final result variable as a string. I did, Do not return anything else, including the steps you took. I just want that final result URL string. And now let's just make this a little bit more interesting by adding another property to the mix. Guest favorite, what's going on here? Looks pretty nice. 20 reviews. Save it. To New York. New York, baby. I just want to take a weekend in New York. Yeah, see the sights. Okay, so we've got 2 in there. We might have to update this link. Copy link. Give that to old Scrape Ninja boy. Yeah, the link updated. It's good to know. Save. So now we should be running through this twice. Run it, baby. So we see we've run this twice. What do we get out? Oh, awesome. It's just given us the result for that one, and it's just given us the result for that one. So let's check this. Damn. Yeah, okay, so it's missing the extensions here. You can see it's got variables, but not the extensions. So I need to just make sure it does that a bit more reliably. So I'm going to say like this. I'm going to pull this out, which is the extensions parameter, which stays static, which is nice. So I'm going to say, look, stick that there. Replace that. Append. Now, finally, append the following string to the result variable. Hang on. Okay, so let's see if it's kept the extensions variable. Have you? Let's move all this other way. Extensions. Yes, it's kept it. Awesome. Okay, let's take this and run it through Mr. Postboy. Sick. Yes! Cooking on gas. Buzzing. Okay, so worth every single penny. Let's have a look for that. Wait. Let's just do a... It's either going to be in here or here. Worth every single penny. Check it out. So sick. Oh, really happy with that. Okay, so now we are at a really good state here. We could do a couple of things to tidy up, but these are like post scenario processes and error handling and all that stuff. But the main gist is here. Before we finish the last few steps, let's just do something really cool. Right now, I'm having to come in here and manually run it, right? How about if I could fire this from an external source, maybe even easier, so I wouldn't have to load up make every time. Now, there's plenty of ways you can do this. You can kind of make a button or any sort of system that can send a post request, because that post request I'm going to show you can end up being the trigger for this scenario. So it's pretty simple, especially if you're aware of how webhooks work, and especially within make.com, you can just set them as a trigger, which is awesome in a lot of ways. So you have complete control over when you run your scenario, as opposed to having to come down here and switch it on and then say, I want this to schedule every 15 minutes. You know, you're going to have something continually scheduling all the time, which is costing you operations and therefore money every time. So a webhook triggered scenario, when you can do it, is way better, because then you just choose and you pay less. So let's just move the trigger from here to there. We are going to, I made one the other day, Airbnb sentiment analyzer. So once you make one, it gives you a webhook URL, which you can then, I was fanning around with this the other day, just post, which I think this is the right one. Yeah. So if I post here with the share, I can call this URL, which is basically the share URL, I can trigger this whole app. So instead of this being a static information, I'm going to say grab the URL that gets posted into this scenario, and I'm going to show you this working now. So that's all set up. Yeah, just to double check, we are going to, just for testing purposes, run this once. So this is now waiting. And this is my share URL. Let's just get it again. Copy. And then, yeah, you just fire a post request to the make generated webhook URL endpoint. I've set it up so that it's just a simple body in the post of a URL. And then we just paste this in here. Again, you could make this like a Notion button or anything, but for this purposes, I think it's pretty nice. Like, just come in here, paste this, hit send, and then you'll see, there you go, it's already working. Triggers. So this can be your trigger, which is very nice. Okay, so now we've got that sorted. Let's start thinking about the final steps. So we've got this final module here resolving in 3 URLs, which hit the hidden API of Airbnb and get us the rooms, 50 at a time, which is really nice. Okay, so now all we need to do is hit the endpoints produced by GPT after this module. So let's try the HTTP module. We're going to aggregate all that data into an array, and then we're going to pass that array into a final AI module that's going to analyze everything. And then last module is going to be basically to post the report to our email. So let's do it. So Scrape Ninja. We're gonna just try this one here, scrape. And we're gonna paste that one in. And then I just stuck all the headers in here that are copied from Postman. So let's change this from a static to a dynamic result from the GPT module. So now we are basically gonna call this get JSON payload from, I'm going to call this listing or property, get JSON payload from hidden API. Okay, move that so we can read it a bit better. Okay, so now when we run this, we're going to get a bunch of payload information, which we can verify in my test. It's a 200, and we're getting like the stuff, like if I look for every single penny, then we are getting it. So we can, yeah, it's there. It's there. We're good. Okay, so now all we need to do is, 1 second. Yeah, so okay, now all we need to do is aggregate this data down, because at this moment in time we're iterating. As we can see here in the iterator, we need to put a sort of full stop to this looping behavior. So we want to get all these different bundles and like squish them back into one source, one data set. So we're going to grab this as the source module, target structure type, we don't care. And we want to get the website raw response, and that's it. So we'll aggregate the reviews JSON here. We're not going to try that. Aggregate to JSON. And then here, what we're going to do is just pass this whole thing into an AI module. Let's give it to GPT-4 again. And we're going to say, system, you are an expert at extracting data and analyzing it. The user is going to say, take this JSON string which we first need to pass, actually. So let's unlink that. Pass JSON, or transform to JSON. We're going to take that and transform it to JSON. And then we're going to say, all right, take this JSON string. I need to run it so that I can access it. Okay, so now we're good. We should be able to come into here and reference the module before. Here we go, the JSON string. So take this JSON string. It contains review, or it's an array of objects, each containing reference to an Airbnb property, each containing a reference to multiple reviews from an Airbnb property. Your task is to read these reviews for each property and to do a sentiment analysis on them. In particular, I want you to focus on the words being said by the reviewer inside the comments field over the ratings given. I want you to also look out for red flags, i.e. pieces, sentiments, information from the reviewers which suggests that the property is underperforming in a certain area, e.g. the property has a mold problem. I want you to create a report for each item in the array and output your final result as a JSON string formatted like so. And then we're going to go like this. We're going to, it's going to be an array of objects. So let's just do that. And then we're going to go, I'm going to call this property URL. Property URL. HTTPS property URL.com, comma, next field, we're going to say analysis. According to the reviews, this place on the whole seems great. However, I did rate I'm worthy of its 4.7 star rating. And then we want to do a field called red flags. Rating. Red flags. We want to say 1 or 2 reviewers mentioned the smell of mold in the property. Okay, so that's 1. And then we can do another one, which is like property URL 2, property URL 1. According to the reviewers, the general sentiment of this place shows that it not a good place to stay based on the following reasons, and then you can just do like XYZ. Red flags, noisy neighbors or something. Noisy neighbors. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So the results. Oh my God, why is it giving me this? It's so funny how it's like, here's the process, below's the Python code. It's like, I don't care, dude. What's the HTML report? Okay, where's the freaking report? Okay, review sentiment report for property. According to the reviews, worthy. So we need to give it a bit more of a clean idea of like the format that we want. So I'm going to just pass this to GPT. Take this description of my desired GPT output and create an example output in HTML. God, I love GPT. It's so good. Here we go. So we're just going to take the body because we're going to slam this into a Gmail module. And that's really it. Yeah, so this is perfect, man. So we're going to take we'll just take the body. And I'm going to say, look, use the following as a guide. Or I'm going to say, format your output like this and don't add any other extraneous information. Extraneous. There you go. So I've pasted the HTML sample response there. Let's run it again. Let's trigger the bad boy. Interesting. Here we go. This is more representative. Okay, so operation 2. The hosts, Estefan and our co-host. This is great. Red flags, no significant red flags. Okay, so one thing that we have a problem with is the aggregation is not working. This is supposed to be coming down into 1 after the iterator. Oh, I think we've set the wrong thing. Nice. Okay, yeah, so we bundled down into 1. This is the last report. I'm going to change this. I'm going to say like a generate sentiment report. That's kind of what's going on here. What's the result? Looks pretty good. The only thing that's ballsed up is that the href for the property is not there, which is a bit annoying. So let's fix that. But other than that, the report's not bad. Here we go. Right here, the result. These are the URLs that we want. So what we can do is we can actually just reference. I wonder if I can just pass it the result from that and have it be intelligent enough to understand what's going on. Let's see. So we're going to look at module 27, and we're going to reference that in this module here. We want to say you can gather the property URL for each report here, and then I'm going to reference 27. Bosh. Okay, that might fix the problem. Let's run it again. Trigger it. Ayo. So look. Results. Oh, sick. It works. Look. Here's the href. Let's just check it out. Is this a real link? God bless you, GPT. Private bed with views of NYC, which is this one. Sick. All right, so that's nice. And then here's a summary. Reviews are overwhelmingly positive. No red flags. Here is the href for the other one. Let's check that this matches. We should get this one here. So let's try it. Oh, so sick. All right. Reviews are highly positive. Super safe neighborhood. Best choice. No significant red flags. Oh, this is so dope. All right, guys. We basically built this. So all we need to do is send an email to myself. I've only got my work one connected, so that'll be fine for now. Add a recipient. That'll be me. Oh, no, yeah, I can send it to my personal. Email address, subjects, your Airbnb sentiment report is ready. And then we're just going to straight up smash in some HTML. Save it. All right, guys, final test. Let's see if this works. Pardon the interruption, but if you're enjoying this video so far, then please consider giving me a like. That really helps my channel and it would be massively appreciated. And subscribe too so that you get further videos just like this on AI and automation, cool builds, all that kind of good stuff in your feed. Thanks very much. Run it. Trigger that bad boy. But imagine this, you get all your Airbnb properties into a list, you click one button, and then within a couple of minutes, you get a nice email. How sick is that? Saves you potentially hours, this automation. Come on, we're almost there. It's going to send an email. Crazy. Okay, let's refresh this. Your Airbnb sentiment report is ready. Let's see how it's formatted. I mean, it looks a bit shit, but here we go. Review sentiment report for this. Summary. According to reviews, this place on the whole is great and seems worthy of its 5-star rating. Reviewers mention this, and this. Specific praises. Look at this. Worth every single penny. So we know it's not talking out of its arse. Amazing. Red flags. No significant red flags. All comments are positive. According to the reviews, it's a gem. Positive feedback highlights the affordability, blah, 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 blah. No significant red flags. And then these links actually take us to my wish list. Guys, we did it in about 4 hours from pretty much idea, planning, and execution all the way to finished product. Like I said, I had not really built this before. I'd got some of the way yesterday just playing around with it. But especially the second half of this was a lot of it just me figuring it out on the spot. So I hope that was interesting and valuable for you guys. Let me know if you think of any cool features that you could see building on top of this. But I'm going to start using this for myself right now. I love it already. There's plenty of ways you could modify this, but this right now, apart from the formatting, which I will change after the video, man, I'm pretty happy with this. And we have most importantly learned some really valuable skills, which is how do you overcome when a platform doesn't give you API access and you just have to scrape, and how can you get into their hidden APIs and get the data that you need and deserve in your life. And we did some really cool things with encoding, re-encoding, base64. There was a whole host of information here. So guys, that was really fun. Leave me your comments down below. Also, if you found this video valuable, leave me a like and subscribe, because I'm going to do plenty more. And I would be really appreciated, because I'm trying to grow the channel. So yes, until next time, guys, peace out. See you later. All right, guys, so I hope you enjoyed that almost 2-hour walkthrough. Just got one last thing to say. Thanks very much for joining me. Especially if you're here at this point, then oh my gosh, well done. A round of applause to you. And I just wanted to say again that we have a newsletter. It's a 7-day, completely free course that just gets pinged into your email. And it's just an introduction into this world. So I think you'll find it valuable, especially if you're liking this content and if you're at this point in the video. So hit the link in the description below and join up and level up your game.